Good morning. My name is Elizabeth de Vries, and I have a website called angelicmercy.com. Or if you would care, if you look behind me, you can see many of my artworks hanging on the wall. I do have an art website called elizabethevriesstudio.com. I will place underneath the videos my different website. I also have another website strictly for animals, having worked with abused horses, dogs, cats, you name it, birds, throughout my entire life. But what's drawing me right now, what has been really speaking to me over the last few months, has been the development of the virtue courage. I've been reading so much online about unconditional love, love this, love that, I love you, people proclaiming their love, etc. But there's not a sense of the basic courageous virtues that back up love in order to attain the full expression of and interchange with divine love itself. If you think about the Buddha, or you think about Jesus, or any of the mystics, from the Sufis down to the Christian mystics, they all went through great periods of endurance and testing. And the virtue that most brought them through to their spiritual path was the capacity for developing within the soul and accessing within the soul great courage. So to me, not everything is pushed by courage. We can't really love somebody else without courage. Courage of our convictions, the courage of our deep soul values. How can we push the values of our own being, such as authenticity, honesty, kindliness? We really cannot do any of those in a full form without the quality of courage. So I wrote down a few notes on courage today, but I realized that courage is the only virtue that man has that he cannot fake. A man or woman can fake that they love you. A man or woman can fake that they are spiritual. They can fake that they are intellectual. They can draw quotes from books and throw them in our face and post on their website or their Facebook page incessant quotes of deep wells of wisdom of others. But are we ourselves truly developing wisdom within our own being? I have often, I've had a lot of conversations with the other side, a lot of conversations discussing what is it that you really look at when you get over there. And they said that what we look at most of all were our intentions. So you could have had the intention to do something right one day and you screwed it up, but your intention was good. On the other hand, you could have had an intention to be thought of as the most spiritual person on earth. And you could have had underlying qualities of ambition, selfishness, or self-aggrandizement beneath the surface. So the intention actually was not a pure intention. So the result that was achieved was not fully embraced by the aspiration to begin with. So I always return to courage, and I would like to tell you a brief story about Gigi. When Gigi was born, a little girl of 18 months, still wearing diapers, she was a little bit late to get out of her diapers. We had in our house a huge flight of stairs, steep flight of stairs. And she crawled over to those stairs. She was around a year for this. And slowly put a knee onto the stair, hiked herself up, then the next knee on the next stair, hiked herself up and kept going higher and higher and higher. She would turn around, she would look at me. I was waiting there to catch her if she fell. But I always let her do things. I always let her test herself. Thank God I did, because in later life, she was called upon to express and exhibit enormous courage. So she finally got to the top stair, turned around, took a big breath, like this, and looked at me and gave the biggest smile from ear to ear you've ever seen. That was an example of courage. It was not the absence of fear. Her eyes were like globes in her face. It was the actual conquering of a fear within herself, and then the feeling of overcoming through accomplishing that task. I remember when she was 2, she climbed the stairs when we were at a resort in the summer and walked to the end of the 30-foot high diving board and looked down, and her father was in the water below, took a big breath, looked at me, and jumped. Gigi was born with an indomitable courage. Gigi never lied. I never remember one time in her life looking at me and giving a lie. She had the courage to face her own truths and to speak her own truths. In fact, she even had a show called Get Real, in which she would bring people on and say, come on, show the courage to say what you really mean. Who are you? What is this all about? No matter what the topic was. And with Gigi, you knew if you asked her opinion on something that you would always get a straight answer. And then, of course, later in life, when it was revealed that she had 4th stage cancer, she faced that with the same courage. She would walk in to get her radiation every day for 2 months solid, and all I would hear in the back room was laughter at her jokes and her making fun of where they were putting the radiation and the mark on her body, and etc., etc. She said, the only thing I've ever feared in this life is to be paraplegic. So she said, I'm going to get the radiation so that it stops the growth of the tumors on my spine, so that I can still walk to my last breath. So that was Gigi's courage. As time went by and the cancer progressed, I would hear her in her room at night, walking the room, holding onto the bed and breathing so hard. And I walked into her room the next morning after her being up all night. I would leave her in those situations because she knew she could call on me. I was right across the hall if she needed me. And she said, Mother, I went beyond the pain. She said, I gritted my teeth and I went beyond the pain to a place of utter ecstasy. She goes, I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid to die. I'm not afraid to let go. The same was when she walked into the AIDS hospice. And she said, let's all go in there. So Gigi, George, Andre, and myself, we all went in there for a full year. 18 young men we worked with. And AIDS in that time, people were putting on gloves, masks, not afraid that it was airborne. Gigi walked in, pulled off her mask, pulled off her gloves, went up, took the AIDS young man in her arms and held him and said, I'm here for you and I'm going to touch you and I'm going to let you feel that healing touch and I'm going to be here until you don't need me any longer. And so we as a family, through following the example of this incredible young woman's courage, my 2 boys, Andre came in and read poetry, and George came in and would sit with them and talk about spirituality, and they would both play their guitars. And it was perhaps one of the most memorable times of my life with my children, all of them expressing indomitable courage. And I could go into each of my children with a deep story of their examples of courage. I'm so proud of their courage. So one of the things I did write down about courage was that courage is often the capacity to face complicated situations where you feel pushed to the limit. Now, you could feel pushed to the limit just by day-to-day living. It could take courage for you just to get out of bed. So deeply are you feeling a depression. But you do it. You call on that inner courage. Courage is facing something head on and not running away from it. Having that kind of capability to just, for example, to be honest, to be authentic, to be standing in our truth, to be honorable in relationship. We have to have courage. Because really, ultimately, what's happening, we're facing ourselves. If we betray somebody else or lie to somebody else or take the easy path of pleasure over character, over growing in character, we're not exhibiting courage. We're actually abandoning our own capacity for courage, because we all have that. It took courage for us to go through that first birth canal. That was a journey for us, a very deep, profound journey. So courage is facing our own weakness in favor of truth. Now, we can have many definitions of truth. We'll talk about truth as a virtue in other videos, but right now I want to stay with courage, because courage is also got a sense of feeling that you need to protect others. It's like, I'm responsible for this situation, and even if it's scary for me to walk into it, I'm going to hold my head up and I'm going to show courage in the face of the fear of death, in the face of poverty. I've lost my home 3 times. It took courage to gather things together and start over each of those times. Here we were as a family at one time, all we had was $200 and no food in the cupboard, and I had a husband to bury. I had to look in the mirror and say, you just find that courage, girl. You can do this. Somehow we got through it. We all stuck together. We bonded as one family, and we kept going. So it also takes courage to face illness. It takes courage to face each day of our existence. It takes courage to confront our grief, to confront our frailties. It takes courage to be vulnerable. Now, I know when my child died, I got on my knees to God and I said, God, grant me the courage to keep my heart open in the face of deep pain. And I made a promise to Shishi. Shishi, I promise you I will walk through this life with courage and with an open vulnerability to all of life, despite the fact that I'm hurting deeply inside. And she looked at my eyes and smiled. And I said, guess where I learned that from? So really in life, if you think about it, we are confronted with pathways of pleasure. When you think of Jesus in the desert, whether you take it as an allegory or truth that this occurred, what did he do? He faced the temptations of man, of ambition, of power, of fame, and turned his back on them and faced life with courage. Even if we follow through to his death, he had his momentary times of, God, why have you forsaken me? He had his human frailty, but that made his courage all the greater to overcome that frailty. No, sweetheart, no barkies. We're always going to get one of those in our readings. So it is, courage to me is the number one virtue. I could go on and on about courage. There have been great people that have spoken about courage all through history. I like what Mary Tyler Moore said. Take chances, make mistakes. That's how you grow. Pain nourishes your courage. You have to fail in order to practice being brave. I love that. I loved her. I thought she was sensational. One has to understand braveness is not the absence of fear, but rather the strength to keep on going despite the fear. Paulo Coelho. You cannot swim for new horizons until you have the courage to lose sight of the shore. So there's something with courage about letting go of where we are. Think of yourself in a river, a raging river, holding on to the branch at the edge of the river. But we know that eventually we're going to get torn from that branch representing what is, all our comfort zones, our safety, our final safety, and letting go and just going with that current of life. Courage is so aligned with integrity, with truth, with telling the truth. Without that, nothing is real. So I today embrace courage. My aspiration is to grow in courage daily. I pray for each soul battling with courage. I pray for people in zones where their courage is called upon, not weekly or monthly, but daily, moment by moment. I'm going to end there with courage. Let me see if I can find one last quote. It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but it takes just as much to stand up at times to our friends. J.K. Rowling. She wrote a lot about magic and courage and overcoming the demons and the dragons, and we all face those within ourselves. So most of all, it takes the courage to face our own shadow self, and to pull out those parts and to make changes. It takes courage to make changes and to stick to those changes and to look at what created those deep chasms within us. So I ask you to look on yourselves with courage and with divine mercy. I will never forget divine mercy as being the sweetest, most consoling virtue of all. Thank you, and God be with you.